Hi, welcome to the Self-Aware Leader. It's a video stream podcast brought to you by Lead Skill. And I'm Ron Oltmans. I'm the founder and CEO of Lead Skill. I'm joined by Angela, who we're going to have a conversation together. If you didn't catch us last week, just so you know, a little bit of background. I've been more than 20 years, about 25 years in the field of coaching and consulting organizations on people effectiveness and leadership. And this is just something that I do day in, day out. And I enjoy the challenge of these kinds of questions and helping leaders solve people and organizational problems. Angela is a designer and a creative. And so we have very different approaches really to life in general. But Angela also has a lot of experience as a interviewer, a video producer in a previous life, and is a creator in her own right and also a coach. So you're in good hands. And we want to take you a little bit further in exploring this whole topic of the self-aware leader. The only thing is, we're not really looking at the leader, the individual, but especially today, we're focusing on the leader within the organization. And so our topic is the emotional culture at work. And we introduced the idea of emotions at work last week in our first broadcast. And today we're going to be diving a little deeper into emotional culture. So welcome, and we're glad to have you for the live stream here.
So, Ron, when you said you're in good hands, I think what people can expect is a conversation where we this is live, so we have questions, things come up, and we hope the information or questions we raise here, or the ways we try to tackle the questions raised, open up new insights, perspectives, or new ways of thinking for people. So that's what I leave with. I don't have all the great answers, but we have some insights that we can share.
And I just want to say where I'm coming from is, if you're with someone who has all the answers, run. Because I feel much more taken care of and at ease when I know that the person who's leading me doesn't have all the answers, because that tells me that I'm not being sold a bill of goods. But when someone has all the answers, I just know that that doesn't occur in nature. That's only something that you find in Frankenstein's lab. It's something that goes totally against nature, is that someone who has all of the answers, and usually they're selling something, and it's not going to turn out for my good or for my benefit. So when I say you're in good hands, it's because you're in the hands of people who don't have all the answers, and we've got um, a few insights that we've gained along the way, and we have a lot of questions. And I think you'll gain more from the questions that we're asking and by thinking about them. And we invite your contribution. So if you're with us live, jump into the chat and the comments. And if you're joining this later, then we would just ask you to let us know what you got from this, and let's continue the conversation offline.
All right. Are we glitching? Do we have the first thing? Take us away, Ron.
Um, yeah, the first thing that I want to take a look at is, when as I mentioned, we're talking about the self-aware leader is really the whole framework, the context for this live stream. And leaders don't exist as an island, in isolation. They're within a larger context, or an organization, if you will. And so, uh, let's begin, I guess, first of all, by just surfacing what is the typical way that leaders will manage emotions at work. So I would invite you to think about your work life, and what your experience of whether it's a safe place and whether it's a free place that you can show up however you are in whatever emotional state, and there are no repercussions. How true is that? Or is it something else?
First of all, I have a question, Ron. Who do you define as a leader? Is it someone that
Anyone
has
with
to be in a
followers.
higher, sorry, go
A
ahead.
leader is anyone with followers.
Okay. Is it, how many followers are we talking about?
One or more.
Okay. And so everyone is a leader, would you say?
Potentially.
Potentially. So is this conversation for people who are at the higher up or just about anyone?
The conversation is for anyone who wants to grow in their self-awareness, who wants to be a better leader, who would say, I'm a leader, or I think I'm a leader. I'd like to be a better leader. Maybe I'm not even sure I'm a leader, but I'd like to grow in my leadership ability. I want to prepare myself for leadership responsibilities or positions, and help me out here.
And the reason why I want to ask this question, because it's like, so the people who say, I don't want to be a leader, or there's a caution, don't follow the leader. So why would I want to see myself as a leader?
So let me say, first of all, that this live stream may not be for you. Anyone who would be like particularly skeptical or resistant to the idea that they are a leader, that they're going to get any value from learning about leadership, you're not going to get much from us, because we are coming from the assumption that you are here trying to grow your leadership. And even if you wouldn't describe yourself maybe as a great leader, maybe you don't even describe yourself as a quote leader because you don't have that positional authority, but you want to grow into leadership skills, or you want to get better at your exercise of influence and leadership with other people. And I would say all of those people are welcome. This is not just a place where you've got to have like, okay, this kind of bank account. You've got to be making this amount, 6 figures or more, as a leader, as an executive. You've got to have this kind of title in order to show up and be worthy of this conversation. That's not what this is about.
So in the creative space, when you mentioned that I'm in the creative space, so I'm not Matisse or Frida Kahlo, some of the big names in terms of what I consider artistic, that bring that creativity into the world. But I see myself as a leader in expressing my creativity. I see my contribution, the work that I do. I see I'm leading with my own convictions and what the messages that I believe in. So in that regard, even though I don't have a lot of employees under me, I see myself as a leader, and I want to grow in becoming a better self-aware leader, managing my emotions at work, and having better facility in dealing with my emotions as I work, because uh, most often they are all over the place, especially when I'm in a very creative mode or non-creative mode. It's also all over the place. So, yeah. So when you
So
talk about emotional culture at work, what do you mean by that?
every workplace, um, I just, I'm, lack of a better word, every place where work is done, where it gets done, whether that looks like an office building, whether that looks like a home office, um, work, a remote working, place, wherever people are getting work done, there is a culture. It's not just like work is done in isolation or kind of in the vapor, or in some abstract sense. And culture is the context. So it has a lot to do with like what's the attitude toward work, and how formal you have to be. What do you have to wear in order to be doing work, to be showing up for work? If you show up on a Zoom call, is there an expectation you have to have your camera turned on, or you have to have your microphone unmuted? Those are all expressions of culture. And so expressions of culture are kind of up here on the surface. And then underneath those are beliefs, values, things that are less visible, but are shaping the culture. It's kind of like the rules, we would say, about how we do things around here, what's allowed, what's not allowed.
I believe you started the channel during the pandemic year. I mean, something that you have not done in so many years of your consulting work, but you wanted to reach a greater group of people. And so one of the things that we bump up against was all the technical things that we have to figure out, right? All the different apps and different things. And and so emotions do run high. And when emotions run high, they can hijack us and prevent us from getting work done, especially when there's so many details to take care of. And I found that the emotions wheel that you created was very useful and something that I just used, in fact, just minutes before we went live on live stream, because there were certain documents I couldn't find and I just was very flustered. And, but you were able to create an emotional culture where I could get back to my calm space and have this conversation. So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you then, so emotional intelligence, so we can say establish it, is a really desirable skill set for today's work, for all of us who work. For me, it keeps my creativity going. It allows me to express my emotions. So just now I was feeling really annoyed. And I was like looking at the wheel. I was like, what is annoyed? And I realized that, oh, the emotion of annoyance is part of anger. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I am angry. Why am I angry? Because there's technical glitches and I'm not a techie guy, And I was like, okay. Whew. And he told
Yeah.
me, give me a moment to breathe. And I was like, do the breath. I was like, okay, this is just, yes, I can be angry about the technical glitches and it's going to keep on happening, but it's okay. I can handle this
Yeah.
because I usually get thrown, by technical stuff. Yeah.
Well, and so those are all good examples of culture. And, even whether you work in a culture where it's okay to talk about emotions, or whether emotional intelligence is something that is, discussed, or is it desirable, or is it something that's kind of put down? Because all of those I've seen in different cultures. And I guess the analogy that may work for some people is, it's kind of like when you travel, when you get out of your home and you go to another place. And the further you go, and you don't have to go far, because, we live in Houston, and, right here in Houston, there's a lot of diversity of cultures, and you can find other places in town where you've got people who come from other parts of the world and have maintained and carried on their culture where they come from. But anytime you travel and you go to another culture, you start seeing, like, oh, okay, people dress differently, they talk differently, and so again, those are kind of the surface level observations you make. And if you start engaging in conversation, you realize that, oh, their way of seeing the world, their assumptions about things are different. And, the same thing applies in a workplace. About if you've worked in one organization and then you go work for another organization, even in the same industry, maybe even in the same town, and you can't help but notice that there's a difference in culture from one place to another. What was allowed at one place is all of a sudden it's like, oops, not allowed. And you just stepped in it and you realize, like, I made a mistake, because people around you kind of let you know, like, we don't do that around here. And so the culture at work, I think that a lot of leaders don't tune into the fact that they have the ability to shape the culture, and that they are the ones who are helping to create the culture.
So when you talk about different cultures like travel and all that, I want to go back to that point. So before we talk about the other point, I wanted to ask you, are there acceptable and non-acceptable emotions at work? Because when we go to certain cultures, like for example, if you're in Chiang Mai, you take off your shoes when you enter a Thai temple or a mosque in Istanbul. You know, you sometimes have a scarf to cover your head in some of the Muslim countries that you travel. So in the same way, are there acceptable emotions or unacceptable emotions at the workplace?
Yes, of course, any place is going to have those kinds of rules about what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, and they're going to be different.
And so if all emotions are valid and can have a place in the workplace, so
No, that's not true.
okay.
What I mean by that is, of course, all emotions are valid, but not all emotions are welcome in every workplace. Unless you have one of those workplaces where it's like you put signs up and you reinforce the culture, like all emotions are valid here. It's like you can just show up however you are and you're welcome. It's okay here. Those are very rare. Very, very rare.
Emotions do hijack us and take us from becoming productive. So, what are the emotions that could be expressed? Like maybe the way I look at it is like I will feel something. I can say I feel something, but then don't let it hijack it and stay focused on the task. So, can you make a distinction on feelings and emotions at work?
I can, but I just have to kind of call a timeout right now. I'm feeling like I'm just meandering. I'm kind of wandering all over the place here, and there's not a direction or
Yeah.
a structure about where we're headed, and it's kind of like popcorn ideas, all over the place. So um, I think it's important to be clear, where are we going? Like what's on the agenda, what's our itinerary today, and what are we trying to cover here? Otherwise, it's like random questions popping up.
Hmm.
Do you have an idea? Can you tell us, or do you want me to set a direction? Because someone's got to decide, and
I would
then
like for you to set a direction and go for it. Like, for example, I want you to start with like just defining emotions and feelings first, and what are the acceptable and unacceptable ones, and why would be some be considered acceptable and why are some not considered acceptable?
so what I want to talk about today, and what this stream is about, is really emotions at work and in the emotional culture and how leaders create that culture. And as far as answering all the questions, we could spend like not just minutes but hours, days trying to define what is culture, what's an emotion, what's a feeling, what is this, what is that, what is it. It's like we're going to have to kind of just make very quick, here's what we're talking about, and then move on. And that may be frustrating to some people who don't get full and complete answers, but I'm going to give you the analogy. It's like standing in Disneyland, and you're on a guided tour, and it's like you never get to go see anything in Disneyland. You stand at the gate the whole time talking about the rules and the background and the history of Walt Disney and the vision of the park and all that. And it's like, okay, great, but we didn't really get to go see anything or do anything. So I don't want to stand in the entrance for too long and be talking about things. I want to go see stuff. I want to go do stuff. So if you're interested to come along and to see stuff, I suggest that you hang on and let's go. If you've got questions, we'll jump into the question if we can, if it's going to set us up for the next thing. And if it's not, we're going to politely say, let's hold that off for later, or we're not going to get to that today on today's tour. And then we're going to move along. So So today, let's talk about the emotional culture at work. And we won't be able to dive deep into the emotional culture at your workplace, but I hope that we'll give some insights that may help a little bit to shine a light on it, and also talk about how a leader can shape the culture and provide better leadership by tuning into the emotional culture that they are a part of and that they are really responsible for in the end.
Before you do that, don't you think that for leaders or anyone who's leading, even if you have just one follower, it is important to understand the emotional culture of yourself first? And would you say you have a good grasp of your own emotional culture? And how does that look like when one has a good grasp?
I suppose that you could use that term culture when you say, emotional culture of yourself in a very loose sense. It's like a metaphor. But I don't think there is really a culture of one where it's like, a culture that's made up of one person. I'm really thinking about that question because I saw something in the news in the last couple of weeks about this guy in the Brazilian rainforest who was the last of his tribe who died. And the Brazilian authorities who look after the original inhabitants, they knew about this guy. They had tried to make contact with him. He resisted it. He stayed away from them. He didn't want to talk to them, didn't want to have anything to do with them. And they knew that he was the last of his tribe, and he was living alone for several years by himself. I know he has a culture that he inherited from his parents, the relatives, the people who were alive at some point in time. And he carried that on, a culture of one. But I don't know. Did he have a culture? I guess he did, but it's kind of a poor culture in the sense that there's not much variety. There's nothing besides just what one individual takes. So it's very inward focused.
I would even
And
then ask you to unpack the term emotional culture and help me understand. Maybe the word choice on my part is, not understood by you. I'm thinking of a visual I created some time back, which I call Orbit of Emotions, when I was working on your emotion wheel. So for me, culture, orbit is like just a lot of emotions inside me. And then when I ask you about like if leaders or anyone who want to lead are aware of the emotional culture, I'm asking, are you aware of the emotional landscape, the orbit of emotions that are within you, that certain basic emotions that run you that you don't even realize, you know. I think that's what I'm referring to.
I think the better word then is system.
Mm.
You can have a emotional system within you. You have an internal experience of emotions yourself, but a culture is really by definition, it's a social phenomenon. It's something that requires multiple people to share, to experience together, and to shape.
Are there generational differences in the way
Sure.
how we approach emotions?
Sure, because culture has to be passed along through the generations, and the people who come after us have to continue it. Just like the man I'm talking about in Brazil, when he died, the culture died with him. There's no one left to carry it on. So there's no more generations. It's done. It's now a historical relic. That may be sad, for some people to think about, but it's a true thing in life that culture is a living thing and it can also die.
So for mature companies or established ones, there would be a sort of a certain kind of emotional culture at work. And so what I'm hearing from you is that it can be changed, especially if the emotional culture of the workplace is not healthy. If you're a young startup, new company, then you have the freedom and luxury to create a new emotional culture, the kind of workplace you want to bring into into your own company. Yes?
Oh, absolutely. Culture changes. It can change for good or for bad.
So what sort of emotional culture should we be looking at when we want to establish or change what we have in companies?
I think first of all, you have to be able to observe and describe your culture to some degree. Maybe not exhaustive detail, but you have to be able to, answer the question, especially for someone who's not come inside and observed or experienced your culture. Like, you need to be able to answer the question. So what's your culture like? And you see this on places like Indeed or LinkedIn, or places where people who are trying to get hired or get a job at a company where they've never worked before, and they start checking the job boards or talking to people who work in the company. They want to know, so what's the culture like? And that's a place where people are asking the question, and those sort of you can get answers about how people would describe the culture, how they would talk about it.
One way people are looking at is does it pay well? Another one is I hear young people talk about is it a toxic culture or is it not? So what is a toxic culture? Is it something where a lot of unacceptable emotions just run rampant, or is it where emotions, even the healthy ones, are suppressed and not allowed room for expression?
I'm thinking about the Tolstoy quote that says, and I forget which novel this is from, but it's like basically like, there's countless ways for people to be unhappy, but and so we could talk about all, many different ways that cultures can be toxic and many different expressions of it. But they take a lot of different forms. Sometimes it's the fact that, okay, the leaders don't have their stuff together, and so the employees are just grumbling about it and constantly grumbling. In other places it's like, well, the pay here is bad, or there's hypocrisy because the executives are paid really well, but the frontline workers are paid really bad. So it's like, there's all different ways to talk about culture and describe, and there's many different ways for a culture to be toxic or to be healthy. There's different expressions. It's not like there's one blueprint or it's a cookie cutter and we can just like, okay, it goes back to how we started this live stream. We've got the answer, and it's just this.
This is the second live StreamYard episode that we're doing. And so your topic you've chosen was the emotional culture at work. I still like you to talk more about like why is that important and why do you use those word choices?
The whole premise of our podcast here, this live cast, if you want to put it that way, is the self-aware leader. And self-awareness is not limited to just looking within. A self-aware leader has to get things done. They have to deliver the goods for their organization, for their people and their followers. And a leader who doesn't pay attention to the culture or is operating from what I call old or outdated scripts about their culture is not going to be as effective as they need to be. So let me just make this practical. I'm thinking about a real example where I was talking to someone recently, and they were describing their culture at work and how the leader of this company was having some basically doing the Elon Musk thing. Elon Musk, in the sense that when Elon tweeted out that, he didn't think that workers were basically responsible enough to work by themselves at home. Everyone needs to get back in the office because you just can't be productive unless you're back in the office. So this is kind of a current topic. RTO, they call it, return to office. And so some leaders have this perception like, I got to get everyone bodily, physically back in the office in order to be productive. It's an old script. I'm not disputing that there are some limited situations where you really do need physical proximity. You need everyone back in the office to get the work done to some degree. But the cultural cost of that, of overlooking the fact that people over the last couple of years have developed new habits, new routines, new expectations, young couples trying to take care of kids, and juggle both the increasing cost of childcare, and they've learned a rhythm of how to get their work done and all that. And all of a sudden you're like ripping them out of these, routines that they've developed that are pretty effective, and saying, you got to get back in this physical office. you know Leaders who are not aware what they're doing to their own culture, and the fact that predictably in a few months you're going to see mass resignation. You're going to see people quitting and going somewhere else to a better culture, or they're going to be quiet quitting where they pull back their engagement with your culture and your work, and they're just going to do the minimum that you're paying them for. If
So
you're not
what
paying attention to all of this, then you're a clueless leader. You're not a self-aware leader.
so how do you become more clued in? For instance, for someone, if a leader, a company founder has a culture that says, yes, we welcome your input and conversations. And then I bring to you and say, I really would like to change up a bit in the way how I work, the locality and all that. And what do leaders have to be? Uh, how do you need to come across without making me feel like I like you're just saying the words? Because how you come across, how you're dealing with a situation just makes me only want to do the quiet quitting. So what are some of the things that you want to give me some questions for a leader to really be thinking about, like, are you doing these things or are you just going through the motions?
Well, I think first of all, you have to actually listen. You have to listen and be able to, in your speaking, give your followers a clue that you're tuned into them and you're aware of what's going on in their everyday reality.
So let me
It,
stop you right there. Can I it was just like you said, listening. I have leaders who listen, but they're really not listening. So what is a challenge that you give leaders to really check that they are really, really generously listening? Because I can see them trying to practice because they have all these management, training and all that stuff that, they know that they have to listen, and they're nodding, having all the facial expressions and all that and all that. But I just know they're not listening to what I'm saying. They already have a set agenda. So how would you challenge these leaders to really, like, are you listening?
well, I would point out that listening is not just what you do, like an act, like a pantomime,
Mm.
when you are face to face with other people, because you're going to get described or labeled as someone who listens or someone who doesn't listen based on what you do next and next and next. Here's what I mean. After the interaction with employees and you've quote listened, you've leaned in, you've showed empathy, you've gone through all the proper steps, you've made all the right noises, the grunts, the understanding, acceptance and all that. When other people are talking, what do you do next? Because the leader who plows right ahead and does exactly what they've always done hasn't listened.
Mm.
And they develop a reputation among the employees, among their followers, as they just don't listen. It's the leader who shows that, okay, they're a little more thoughtful, or they paused, they considered, they even tried something different. It's like, we're willing to give a go at hybrid work, as the example of the hour. It's like, you don't have to come back to work 5 days a week or every day of the work week. We're going to, continue allowing time to work at home, as an example. I mean, changing things up like that shows that you listened. Continuing to do exactly the same thing. And here's the thing. some leaders actually make the mistake of doing the same thing and then explaining and justifying why they're doing exactly the same thing versus letting people really get a sense that, hey, they were heard. Like I can actually say back to you what you said better and with more nuance than you said it, so that you really know I heard you. So even if my actions don't give you what you wanted, it's like, at least you know you were heard.
Yes, the next step. I like what you said about the next step because it's the action. Not watch what they say, but watch what they do.
Or
Um,
don't just what they do, like nodding and looking thoughtful and acting like they're listening.
what they do next. Okay,
Right.
that's one something that a mentor, told me repeatedly. What they do next. So it helps me. My aha in the moment of listening to you is that then it crosses cultural differences. So you could have a really conformist culture, like in Asia, where I'm from, originally in Singapore, where people are more, or Japan, where people are more differential. They nod a lot, but still you can bring a healthier, emotionally healthier culture into the workplace as a leader in the way you change up what you do next. Because what you do next help me, the employee, see whether you actually heard what I'm requesting, what I'm asking for. So yeah, thanks for that answer to that. Do you have another question you want to bring up before I move on to that you want to say before I bring another point up?
We've been talking about culture and emotional culture at work, and culture can be like this big, huge thing. And I guess I want to emphasize this point that it is a big, huge thing. And you don't like, quote, solve culture. You don't change a culture all at once, but you do introduce changes in small, practical ways. And it's kind of like practice or like exercise. The more that you do something, the better you get at it, the more you reinforce the patterns. And over time, the changes accumulate. It's like compounding. The first 100 times that it happens, it doesn't look like anything's happening. But over time, it gets stronger and stronger and more important. So, you know, a leader who is trying to, make some changes within in their culture, who's already thinking ahead of me and has said, in the context of my company, Ron, I know where we need to be going. And I know some of the changes that I want to see happening. And they're already working ahead in their mind. That's great. And you also need to be aware that the changes come slower than probably your thinking and the pace at which you'd like to see it happen. You just got to stay the course. You got to stay consistent and keep reinforcing. But in small, consistent steps, you can make changes in the culture. And so you got to be smart about where you place your bets. Like, what is going to have the most impact over the long term? We often make the mistake of only looking at the short term. And leaders are responsible for creating what I call quick wins and making a difference that people can feel and see, visible difference. But ultimately, they'll be judged by the long term.
So to use the Brazilian example that you use, you don't want to wait till you're the only person left in the tribe where, where it's not very viable to study what's going on or what the culture was like in that particular tribe, to use your example just now. Because you mentioned something about how to study culture it's with other people, right?
Mm-hmm. It's social, yeah.
So when is it a good time to study the emotion, the temperature of what the culture is of the company? What tools, how do you go about doing it? What do you suggest? If I'm a leader and I want to do a sort of like a check-in, like, what is the process? What tips do you give and what do you offer?
Um, the the best research I've seen suggests that cultures start out from the very beginning. So if you think of a startup where you got a handful of people, less than 10, getting started, and the way that they interact, the way that they go about doing business, a culture already has started developing. So the seeds of it are there. And over time, even as you add more people, as they come on board, they have the potential to change or alter the culture, but more often than not, they actually just add to it and amplify what's already there in the culture. So the tools that you're asking me about, I would say, um, you can do culture surveys, you can do all sorts of ways to formalize and your study of the culture. But one of the best is to just ask the questions, like I was saying, how does your company do on the interview, sort of test? Someone who is wanting a job in your company and they ask the question, what's the culture like? How does that question get answered? Not just how the leaders want it to be answered, but how do actual employees working within the company tend to answer that question? That's a very good clue about how people are actually experiencing the culture and how they talk about it themselves.
Isn't it culture survey then, or am I missing something here?
The You can do a culture survey, like I said, a formal way to collect this, like by asking questions. But it kind of goes back to the thing about what people say in answer to questions and questionnaires and what they actually do don't always line up. And so, I'm thinking about my friend who worked for an airline, and he talked about consumer research. And he says, when we have focus groups and we ask people questions, we get one set of answers. When we watch their behavior, we get a whole different set of answers. And I would say you need to look at both. So a culture survey is useful. You also need to, watch what the data or watch what the behavior tells you about things.
So
Some
as for
companies, and I've been part of this process, will formalize and talk about their values and their mission statement, all this. And the question that I would often ask is, okay, how often do you reference these? How often do these come up in your internal debates or conflicts? Do you actually have conflict over these things? Because if they're not an open source of ongoing debate and a vibrant source of conflict internally, they're not living. They're dead artifacts that are in the trophy case.
And so what is the process that you walk people through?
You're talking about for culture, to understand the culture, or what?
To if I want to dive deeper into this, for if I'm a self leader, a self-aware leader, I want my company to grow, to have an emotionally healthy work culture. So what is the process? Because you're still telling me that the formal surveys, are bunk, are you expecting me to go to Indeed and, LinkedIn, like just like basic water cooler conversations to find out, which is, I mean, you're a data scientist kind of guy. So what are we, I need some guidance here, what you are offering or suggesting that I as a leader can just walk away after this conversation thing. Like, I want to think about that one.
I would correct what you said. I'm not saying that formal surveys are bunk. I'm just saying that you can't take them as encapsulating the entire truth. They're one data point. They're an important data point that you should factor in, but they don't tell the whole story. And I've seen leaders make the mistake of just taking that and focusing on that, because in the situations where they reinforce what the leader already wants to believe, or a message that they want to propagate, they focus on it too much. So by all means, do the culture survey. Those are important points, but also do the informal data gathering and observe what people are actually doing, what their behavior, what their actions tell you. Take several different readings from different sources. I think the multidimensional approach is what I would recommend that, you know, every leader needs to be thinking about. Is certainly survey and ask your people, you know, to give answers to questions. Take time to also do some, you know, what I call network analysis, and look at, you know, who who are the people who are talking to one another most frequently and in conversation a lot. Who are the people who never talk to one another? So one way to do this is culture survey. Another is through network analysis. There are formal tools that you can use, like a Denison culture survey. There are other tools where you can take your data records, your IT records, you can go over it, do some number crunching, and it will start showing you things. Very few people are able to do this on their own. You need to hand it over to experts who can take the data and then show you the graphics, the visualizations, just like in your business, you collect so much data, and then people who are really good at Power BI or whatever, you know, business intelligence suite of tools you use, they give you the illustrations, they explain what your data means. Oh, okay, that's the story it's telling. You need to do the same thing about your culture and listen to what the data is telling you. Does that answer the question that you were asking?
I still like to know the process that what do you know,
Oh, process. Okay,
yeah.
so the process is going to depend on the company.
Mhm.
What size? Are we talking about a 8, 10 member person, 50 member, 5,000 member? So that's a conversation we should take offline. And anyone who's listening to this and interested, love to have that kind of a, you know, personalized, customized conversation with you. But it's going to be different. And that's the thing. My company, Lead Skill, what we do with clients are customized solutions. We don't do one size fits all sort of, you know, approaches for everyone.
And so for today's topic, what is the thing that I can walk away, that I need to be walking away thinking about?
Self-aware leadership. What is your culture? How do you describe it? How do other people describe it? Is your culture, in terms of emotions, is it an open culture? Is it a closed culture? Is it a controlling culture? So the adjectives that we could start supplying will be very telling. So I have an article on my website at leadskill.com that I wrote recently about leaders create the culture of openness in terms of, you know, the emotions of their organization. And it's just an introductory sort of look at that. But I reference several studies, other thinkers, and books, and so there are places that you can go and you can get some help on that. um, but I would say start paying attention to, even, you know, that you do have a culture, and how you approach emotions in your workplace either are helping people process through that, or is actually shutting people down and sending the message, we don't welcome that kind of thing here. Don't bring your emotions to work. We just hire robots. We just want people to show up and do their job and be automatic about it.
Okay, the article will be found in the show notes link.
Yeah, I'll put that as a link, so that
Okay.
you can get that in the description
All right.
afterwards.
Yes. So, well, is there any last words that you'd like to say? This has been helpful to be thinking about, checking in what the asking the question, what the emotional culture of one's workplace is. And yeah.
I guess I just now I was trying to give the message of hope that you can do things about this. There are things that you can do that are, you know, you can take practical steps to start addressing and shaping the culture. And so, mixed with the message of hope, I also want to give a message of realism. This is tough. This is tough to the degree that it's going to stretch you as a leader to become self-aware. is a uncomfortable process. It can even be painful at times, but it's an uncomfortable process. And you know, even on our live stream, I mean, just before we started, it's a painful process to start something new. In the middle of our live stream, we took, a long pause there to like, because it's like, hey, wait a minute, we've got different visions, clashing visions about what we're trying to do and where we're going and what's the best way to go about it. And we got to negotiate and work those things out. And you face those sort of things every day. How you move on and take the next step defines your culture. And so as a self-aware leader, are you tuning in to those things? Are you addressing them? Are you sweeping them aside or sweeping them under the rug?
And coming from me as a creative space, from my own creative space, is that I've been looking at it's okay to have silence. So when there was a very long pause in our live stream, I don't know how these technical things go, whether they'll be editing or what, and I'm absolutely comfortable with that. I've seen in situations where there have, where people are not comfortable with the display of certain emotions. So, you need to take a break, go get a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, and just sort of like diffuse the emotional, the high intensity of the high intense emotions being displayed. But in a live stream here, I mean, I can't just, I guess I could walk off and just have a break, or I just stay with it and just be calm and take my breaths and be in the room itself. And that has been something that I'm uh, practicing. And I think there was a lot of hesitation before about going live, because it's like, what do you do with awkward silences or when things don't go? Because when I work in the network station, we film rows and rows of things, and then we go to the editing suite where we have the editors edit the things, the right sound bites for a 5-minute conversation, so that it all looks fabulous, so that the ratings are right and high and good. But in this new culture where we are sharing content, where it goes live, what do you do with the glitches? You will feel emotionally off kilter. And then how do you deal with that? So when you say, like, you have to remember what's at stake here and to move forward in accomplishing what's at stake, I think that's useful for me. And for me, one of the things is I'm fine with silence.
Yeah, but a lot of people aren't. I think you're in the minority there.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think it's Asian thing? Because I don't know. Well, we tend to be okay with just quiet. Yeah.
My
But
experience training.
we're processing things inside, but we're okay with quiet versus like, tweet all we can want to online.
My experience of training in Asia and being in front of groups, and if there was long pauses of silence, people are just as awkward
Mm,
and they avert the gaze, or you
mm.
see faces flush and blush. Um, you see people looking away. There's a lot of embarrassment and shame that's in those moments of silence. It's very rare to find people who are truly comfortable with the silence.
Glad you brought up that nuance of shame. I think you probably can see it because you come from another culture, you know, and yet it's so strong and predominant in Asian culture that most people would miss it. I'm glad and surprised that you actually be able to pick that up. So good job, Ron. I'm done with here of all my questions. Is there anything else you would like to
Nope,
say?
that's all I got. So thanks for joining us today on the live stream for the Self-Aware Leader. And we have other videos on our channel here that might help you to grow in your emotional intelligence. I say might because I really hope that it's valuable information, but I'd love to hear your feedback. Helping leaders develop their own emotional intelligence and also lead their teams and their organizations down that path a little bit further. And I guess my final plug for leaders is your organization truly will not grow larger than how much you're willing to grow yourself. And, you know, some leaders who are unwilling to grow themselves have to actually step back and hire someone else to take over, someone who can lead in a better way. And so that's also an option. But if you're one of those who's still engaged and wanting to take your organization further, reach out to us. Lead Skills specializes in leadership development and helping leaders grow their self-awareness and their emotional intelligence. And we welcome those sort of conversations. There may be some silence, there may be some awkwardness, there may be discomfort, and there's probably also going to be insights and ahas and maybe some joy in discovery. And so those are things that we take part in every day, and we welcome the opportunity to include you in those conversations as well. So reach out to us and let us hear from you.
So coming live from Ron and Angela Oatmans, a couple who have been married for almost 30 years. Yes.
Thanks for joining us here at Lead Skill, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.